What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and this is the vlog for Friday, September the 10th, 2021. And today I'm going to be covering a couple of things, maybe. Um, I want to talk a little bit about some frustration that I've recently run into with shooting video. Not that I'm stopping or anything like that, but just uh, frustration that I've run into sort of in general. I want to talk a little bit about the Canon RF 100 to 400 that was just announced, and the 16 f2.8 that was leaked, I should say, maybe not necessarily announced because I don't believe Canon has formally announced them yet. Um, but those two lenses and Canon's RF platform as a whole, a surprising observation for me in that it has become, or at least it has, a very interesting product lineup or capability set available for beginner, novice type photographers. Now, I've got some opinions on this as somebody who isn't in that market per se, or market segment, but we're going to talk about that. And maybe if I have some time, I want to talk a little bit about uh, some gear envy, since I'm on kind of on the topic of lenses and systems. Um, I want to talk a little bit about some gear envy and a lens idea thought that I had just recently, sort of that built off of that. And I don't get to that latter part because of time. Well, that'll be a future episode. So, frustration with video. So earlier today, I put up episode or tip 17 of my Canon R5 tips and tricks series. And the video focuses on looking at uh, ISO, how ISO, so right, manual ISO, auto ISO, how the camera indicates what's going on. And I got to be honest, I'm not overly thrilled with the video as a whole. Um, and I don't know quite how or why or what I can do to improve it, or what specifically the problem that causes me to not be thrilled with. Some of it comes down to a long running problem that I've had in putting videos together, putting articles together, putting a lot of things together, which is essentially that a lot of this material, there's when it comes to talking about about cameras, photography, even, there's just a lot of this stuff in cameras and photography is very complicated. It's complex. There's really, if you really when you or if you really want to understand what's going on, it's not something that you can simply say, oh, well, it's this simple X. It's not it's just simple. Don't worry about it. It's not, I shouldn't say don't worry about it. It's just simple. Because the reality is when you start digging into it, there's a lot of stuff that really maybe isn't as simple as it seems. And something as simple in this case as Canon's the ISO, auto ISO, overriding auto ISOs, there's a lot of nuance to it. And one of the things that's always frustrated me about a lot of this stuff is trying to figure out how to communicate complicated ideas clearly. So, not just ignoring the complexity, because I find a lot of people do that. They'll ignore or they'll dumb down the complexity to the point that it's really almost not worth talking about, because it's like, it's auto ISO, whatever, don't worry about it, just, yeah, it's that, and it's not helping you as an end user to be able to understand what's happening in your camera, or what sort of conditions, situations you're in. On the same token, I also get comments from people that are like, dude, this is this is way too complicated, man. Like, I can't deal with this. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'd like to reach those people, but I also, on the same token, am not I, dumbing the content down to ignore things or not explain what you're seeing doesn't help as far as I'm concerned. It's not helping people. At the same time, like I said, trying to get content across that deals with these complicated things in a fashion that isn't, that clarifies them. So instead of making it sort of more confusing. And that's always been something that's sort of frustrated me with, you know, all of this kind of things. And some of it comes back to, I have a saying, a little sign on my wall that's a quote from Adam Savage that says, "Good writing is clear thinking made manifest." And I don't know, maybe I should take that down, because on one hand, I really agree with that. On the other hand, when I can't clearly communicate something, and in a extension, this is, I mean, it's not writing per se, but it is communication. If I can't clearly communicate something, is my thinking not clear? Is that really like it? Maybe that's the problem. I just can't think clearly about this. Except I understand what the camera's doing, so maybe that's not the case either. The other problem that I ran into in this video is it's sort of a production quality issue. So the vast majority of the video is filmed looking, it's the video out from the R5 looking at what the camera sees. And I didn't technically need to shoot the whole video that way. I could have shot the video with an A camera doing, this scene here, and the video feed being recorded, and tried to sync stuff in post, or tried to get something together like that. And, maybe I should have done that. And the reason I didn't do it kind of came down to, I'm really struggling with finding a better way to do more cameras, multiple camera angles, or multiple feeds. It's difficult and frustrating and challenging, I could say, for me to do some of this stuff, because I think what it comes down to is, I've long talked about small people problems, small production problems. Trying to do something as a solo shooter where I don't have a production team, or I don't have the money to put into a massive video setup or something like that, makes things challenging. And regardless of whether you're doing content production, this is something you're trying to make money on, or you're doing this because you just really want to learn it, or you love it, or it's the message that you're trying to convey is what's really important to you, and this is what you found to be the most effective way to convey it. There is a balance, definitely, between the difficulty of doing something, and the ability to develop the effort, I guess, maybe put out the effort to actually do the content, do the work. And this isn't to say, well, work should be easy, but on the same token, there's hurdles, there's hassles, there's things that get in the way. So the way I do my recordings right now is, I have a USB capture, HDMI capture device. That's what's recording from a camera that I have on my desk. That's this setup. And if I want to shoot the menus, the live view out from, say, an R5 or a 5D Mark IV or whatever, I can plug the HDMI from that into the capture device. So I really only have the ability to capture this stream or one other stream. I don't have multiple capture inputs. Now, of course, I could put a card in this camera. I could record this camera and not deal with the HDMI capture, which, I mean, that would completely work, and sync things up in post. knowing that the latency is involved and whatever, and have that kind of thing going on. 5D Mark IVs don't have 5D Mark IVs don't have articulated screens, so I can't easily see what this camera is looking at without having my little monitor hooked up to it, which means, but if I have it hooked up into other cameras, then things get rerouted, and it's in some respects it's a problem I need to throw money at. I either need more monitors or more capture devices or something. And like I'm really starting to feel that with these videos that just this one angle is it gets old. I mean, it gets old to me. I mean, granted, I'm trying to convey information, but there's still a level of having to have an engaging content. And I feel like, broadly speaking, what's happening is I'm reaching a plateau in my ability to produce the production value that I look at or that I want to. So I got lighting pretty much, I won't say dialed, but I've got the lighting equipment that I need to be able to light something, at least to where I'm comfortable with it. I've got cameras that I could record with, multiple angles. But then it becomes a synchronization issue, getting everything synced into the computer, into something that I can mess with. And that's where the trouble is, because I'm not finding a good answer to any of this. So Open Broadcast Studio, OBS, which I'm using for doing the recording, it can only record one stream. So even if I get a fancy 4-port or 8-port or whatever SDI professional grade capture card, and I start hooking everything up and I have like 8 cameras or whatever, OBS will only do one stream. And I'm at a loss actually to think of a solution that, for example, will record 4 streams simultaneously. What I find most people who want to do 4 streams do with OBS is they tile their 4 or 5 cameras or their desktop view or whatever onto a bigger project. So since I'm shooting 1080p, I could do a 4K a project space in OBS, tile 4 cameras on there, and then cut that apart after the fact so that I'm only recording one input, but then I cut that into pieces after the fact, and I have, cam A, cam B, cam C, cam D. And I think I'm going to try that, but largely just to see if it works reasonably well. I think it's possible I should be able to do the encoding with my GPU, so that takes care of that load. And that would get me 4 cameras. I could also potentially go up to an 8K project that would give me as many as 16 cameras, which I don't have 16 cameras, so that takes care of that in a lot of respects. The other option that I've looked at is something like the Blackmagic Design Mini Pro, A10 Mini Pro ISO. That will record up to 4 cameras. I don't really know if I need the 8 camera version, but up to 4 HDMI inputs to an SSD over USB Type-C. It would be nice if that could record that to a computer directly instead of having to play musical devices, USB SSD hooked up to it. That also has the advantage of I could do some live editing, so I can switch cameras on the fly. It generates a DaVinci Resolve project, which, since I'm currently using DaVinci Resolve as my NLE, I can make the tweaks to the live edit on the fly. That's a lot of interesting options or capabilities there. Unfortunately, what Blackmagic Design didn't do with the A10 Mini Pros is support XLR audio in. And I'm using an XLR microphone for the audio here, so then I need to deal with audio separately, syncing it all together. I don't really know if I like that as an option, in part because the Mini Pro is like $800, which is a good chunk of money. That, you know, and I'm loath to put $700 to $800 out on something that I don't know if it's actually going to solve my problem. Like I've when it comes to video, I don't have enough experience with the video stuff as a whole to be able to really look at something and say, yes, this is going to definitely solve a problem that I have. Like cameras and lenses to a large extent, because I know what my problems are, or problem spots are. I can look at a lens and say, yes, that would solve a problem, or that would help, or look at a camera and say that feature would be really important and help me. That But with video stuff, I'm very much groping around in the dark with some of this stuff to try and figure out how to make things work, how to make things interact, how to produce this content. Which brings me to the other possible option. Is so one option is having more cameras, more synchronized inputs, more inputs just in general being recorded. The other option that I'm sort of considering is, or the other option is to shoot things out of order. So shoot the way I do everything right now is very linear. And it's very linear because I have a hard time not thinking about it that way. So I have a hard time thinking about, well, I'll do the end, and then I'll, like, if I'm going to do something where I'm going to cut away to a different angle, for example, I could do the intro here and then pause and then do the outro and then stop that recording, cut it, deal with that in post in the edit, and then go to whatever it is that I'm cutting away to and then record that. And I have a really hard time thinking through that. Now, the thing that I've learned in doing all of these videos so far is that the more you do things, the easier it gets to understand and to do that kind of stuff. So prior to the EOS R5 tips and tricks, I had a very hard time doing B-roll at all. Like I just could not wrap my head around how to shoot it and how to work it into a project. And I'm getting better at that through experience, through shooting stuff on the camera as B-roll and then being able to bring it in to illustrate a point. I'm still not completely set on shooting like all kinds of B-roll. There's still stuff that I still have obviously mental like hurdles that I haven't gotten over with, but I also know from the experience of shooting the B-roll in like the R5 project that those hurdles are, it's a mental hurdle. It's not a I can't do this. It's I just need to do it enough to be more comfortable with doing that. The only problem I run into with shooting things out of order is I've stopped working from a script. I've switched to I make a document that has notes. It When I'm putting it together, I'm thinking about how I want to say things, what order I want to say things in. But I'm making an outline and then I'm doing these more extemporaneously. I'm doing them on the fly. And I think that in some respects it's more natural because I'm not just reading a script, but it also means that they're not as it's much harder to choreograph it. So I don't know, well, how long is it going to take me to explain something? And so if I'm going to shoot B-roll of doing that thing, I need that B-roll to be timed out to take so many minutes. And this is also part of the problem that I've had running with shooting B-roll in general, which is if I need it to fit a certain time frame, how do I figure out that time frame? It's almost like sometimes I feel like I have to shoot everything, shoot the B-roll, edit the thing, and then realize that the B-roll was too fast or too slow, and then reshoot B-roll, which, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable it's possible to do that. So, I mean, it's possible to do that. It's just, that's not a very efficient level of production for the scale that I'm working at. So that's going to take a lot more time and a lot more effort for me as a solo shooter, solo worker to do, where I don't have a team that could recapture some of the B-roll without me being there, with me being working on the edit or moving on to working on something else. So that's been a frustration. It's been a growing frustration that I've run into with the EOS R5 tip project. I started off and I was 20-ish. Well, I've actually recorded 22 video or 21 videos of that at this point. The first 5 or 6, I was really stoked. I really felt that they were concise. They were, for me at least, they were clear. They were put together at a level that was really high for my standards or for what I was doing before. So they were a step up in production quality, value. And now I feel like, well, it's the normalization of a thing. I've become accustomed to that level of production value, and I don't think it's good enough anymore. So I have to figure out what the next step's going to be. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm going to be playing with it. So you may see some things in coming vlogs, coming tips, coming lighting videos, uh, changes, different angles, trying some things out. Uh, I don't really know yet because I don't really know what the exact solution is. I know one thing I'm seriously thinking about trying is the multiple angles in uh, one file and cutting that up. I have an idea how to automate that, so I will probably be talking about that potentially in a video if that whole thing works out. But yeah, I'm not really sure where to go from here or what to do to improve. And I'm not really sure, like, I go back to what I started with. Part of it is trying to figure out how to communicate better. And I don't know of a good way to how to be clearer and more concise. And I don't know of a good way to sort of learn that. So I don't know. We'll see. Uh, Not planning on stopping. I think that this is the big take message here is that I think you've always got to push to do better. You have to push to improve. You can't. Standing still is going backwards in some respects, and I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forwards. And so, for me, looking back over the history of video, of me doing video, it has definitely been a slow, tedious, challenging, difficult development process. There's an awful lot of discomfort and learning happening on the production end of things, on my end. So, while I might look like I'm perfectly comfortable, and I've gotten way more comfortable sitting in front of a camera and talking to it, the there's a lot that goes on trying to figure out how to present something, trying to figure out how to make it accurate. I've scrapped whole videos because they just didn't work, or I wasn't happy with the way I presented something. So it's been a long process. And I guess in a sense this reminds me of back when hybrid DSLRs first hit the market in like 2007. And I remember a lot of photographers talking about how, oh, everybody's going to be doing video and it's going to be da, 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 da. And I remember saying to people then, no, what's going to happen is there are going to be some people who can't transition. They just cannot. There's going to be people who don't want to transition, or they won't transition. They're still photographers. That's what their focus and interest is, and they're not going to start doing video. There's going to be people who can't transition. They want to do video, but they cannot make the mental leap from stills to video. And there's going to be an interesting point on that coming up in my lighting series in a couple of episodes, probably talking about one difference, or one of the differences that you can run into between lighting, for a still and lighting for a video. Not, it's not completely different, but it's something that you can potentially run into. But anyway, and then there's going to be the people who kind of get it and they sort of adapt quickly, and then like there's going to be the people who just immediately pick up shooting video, and it's like they've been doing it for their entire career. And I'm definitely more in the I'm struggling or struggle to make the jump type of person. There's a lot more complexity in video when you I mean, obviously you can pick up your smartphone and put it in selfie mode and shoot a video and not have that complexity, but there's a lot more complexity in video than there is in stills if you want to, well, partly if you want it to be there, and partly as a product of everything else that's going on. So video is only half the problem, sound is the other half the problem. You have environmental considerations. So if you're just shooting, sound. Anyway, moving forward, trying to find ways to improve my product or my output, my quality. That's what I'm going to be or what I'm realizing I need to focus on. So with that said, I want to talk quickly about Canon, the rumored, leaked, whatever, Canon RF 100 to 400 and 16 RF 16 f2.8. So this is coming, saw it on Canon rumors. The 100 to 400 is going to be an f5.6 to f8 lens with image stabilization and an ultrasonic motor. It's not clear what kind of ultrasonic motor, whether it's going to be, at least I didn't see this, maybe I just missed it, whether it's going to be a ring ultrasonic or a nano ultrasonic or whatever potentially is. Obviously, it's not a replacement for the 100 to 400L, the EF lens. This is the RF version of the 70 to 300. The sort of entry level 70 to 300s. Of course, we have no idea what the price is, or at least I don't know what the price is going to be. It's supposed to be announced on the 14th, I believe, is the date that's been given. When the R3 is announced and some other stuff ends up being announced, these two lenses are supposed to be announced as well. And looking at the pictures, it looks pretty reasonable as a sort of entry level 70 to 300 replacement. Yeah, it gives up the 70 to 100, but you go from 300 to 400, and that's, I think that's pretty reasonable, and I'll come back to that in a second. The other one that they had leaked images of is the 16 RF 16 f2.8. Now the 16 f2.8 is an STM lens, not a USM lens. I don't know where I fall on the whole STM versus USM thing. I know where I fall. I prefer USM lenses. I have some STM lenses. I don't like the performance that I see out of them, especially like for manual focus. Even though the RF 24 to 72.8 is focused by wire, the responsiveness difference between that lens and my 50 f1.8 STM, now granted one's EF, one's RF, so that may be a factor, but it's night and day. But what I started looking at or started realizing is Canon has a really interesting setup for in the EOS R platform for beginners or novice photographers. And granted, okay, it's not cheap. Nothing's cheap in interchangeable lens photography anymore. The great casualty of the smartphone decimating the camera industry, in my opinion at least, is that it has pushed everything up market. It's pushed the bottom end higher. So cheap interchangeable lens cameras are less of a thing, less of a factor, less of a consideration compared to higher end interchangeable lens cameras. And this is largely, I feel like I said, a product of smartphones eating out the bottom end. Why buy a point and shoot when you can buy, when your smartphone can do it? So if I'm buying as a consumer, if I'm buying a camera, a purpose-built dedicated camera, I'm not buying, I'm buying up market, or I'm buying upper, higher end, as it were. So Canon has, when Canon, the first year or two of the RF platform, my criticism was that Canon had a ton of really high-end L lenses and they didn't have a pro camera body. The RP was definitely a digital rebel in mirrorless form. In fact, I'm really surprised they didn't bring it out under that kind of branding. The R was, as far as I was concerned, a 6D mark, a 6D in mirrorless form. Little, maybe touch higher upscale, but not necessarily. It certainly didn't, to me, it didn't feel like it was a 5D replacement. The 5D replacement was very much the R5. Of course, that's what Canon markets it as, but that's what the feature set puts it as. And the R6 is what Canon's very clearly marketing as the 6D replacement, the in mirrorless form. The R and the RP, well, okay, first of all, the R and the RP were a little bit of we need to put something out. So the R used the 5D Mark III or Mark IV sensor. The RP used the 6D Mark II sensor, if I remember correctly. Both of which are reasonably acceptable quality sensors, or sensors for mirrorless cameras, so that they dual pixel AF, blah, blah, blah. But the camera, the feature set wasn't super high end. And then you had that matched with like all of these L lenses, including the 28 to 80 or 28 to 70 f2, which was like $3,000. And I'm going like, that's a really, like, where's the entry level glass? Now we have that. So on the entry level side of glass for Canon's EOS R system, we have the soon to be announced 16 f2.8, a 24 to 105 f4 to f7 or to 7.1, a 24 to 240 f4 to 6.3, a 35 f1.8 macro with image stabilization, a 50 f1.8 that's image stabilized, a soon to be announced 100 to 400 that's image stabilized, a 600 f11 image stabilized, and an 800 f11 image stabilized. And I started thinking about this and I realized, Canon has a really comprehensive lineup. Like, if you're not really willing to put $4,000 into an EOS R5 and $2,000 or more into each of the lenses that you're putting in front of it, but you still want to look at a mirrorless camera and you want something full frame, reasonably decent, and on a more budget level. That is a crazy range. And the 611 and 811 give, and those are even almost interesting as a higher end user's perspective, give the platform this really interesting, like, nobody else has that. There's no Nikon or Sony 800 f11 out there that's super compact but still a really decent quality 800 millimeter lens, and that's there. And then on the camera side of things, you've got like the EOS RP, which is like down around $1,000. And if you're obviously if you're looking at an R5 or an R3, it's not really going to interest you that much. But if you're talking about, I want to get in a full frame mirrorless camera, reasonable system, it's decent resolution, 26 megapixels, it's dual pixel AF, it's got decent well, I won't say decent, it's got okay video capabilities, but that's almost more a product of the age of the sensor and the age of the technology than anything else. But it'll do 4K at 24 frames a second and 1080p at 60 frames a second. And maybe this is just my own biases talking, but I feel like the reality is that if you're if you're getting into photography or videography, you're getting into this. You're not a established filmmaker or whatever. You don't need 8K. You probably don't even need 4K. Like, you're better off in many respects of starting at 1080p, making good content, because the content is going to be worth far more. What you're doing, the quality of your content is going to be worth way more than the quality of that you shot it at 4K or 8K or something like that. You're not going to be producing huge amounts of data, which is something that even I have a real hard time with. I struggle with dealing with shooting video when I'm producing 100 gig of data a month, doing, you know, a couple hours of video all told in a month, in a month time. That's really hard to deal with storage wise, especially if you actually care about the storage. So you're storing it on a NAS or a file server or something that has redundancy, so you don't just lose everything if a hard drive dies. You're backing it up redundantly so that you don't just have one backup as a single point of failure. You're doing something about an offsite backup, which maybe you're doing it to the cloud. But when you start talking about, well, I'm shooting 100 gigabytes of data a month, you got to have a pretty decent internet connection, especially on the upload side, to be able to handle moving that off site reasonably quickly. Like, if you're not on 100 megabit upload or something like that, you could easily be in a situation where you're producing data faster than you can back it up to the cloud. And then, of course, you're talking about cloud storage costs. You're talking about hard drive costs. You're talking about USB disk costs. Like, shooting at high resolution because it's 4K and that's what everybody's supposed to shoot at, uh, isn't necessarily a, a the place to start. You're better off. I feel you're better off working at lower resolutions and iterating rapidly in a way that you get to put content out that you can learn on. You can, like I'm doing, like I say I keep doing with these videos. It's a thing that I'm, as much as it is that I'm trying to share what I know and what I understand and help other photographers and videographers improve their camera or their skills, or learn or understand how things work better, or how they can do stuff maybe they didn't even know they could do on their camera. It's a constant learning experience for me. To every time I do a video, how can I make it better? How can I make the next video better? How can I improve? And that's when you're running out of storage every video, that's a much harder thing to iterate rapidly on because you're shooting bigger files basically. And so the EOS RP is, even though I'm not super interested, or I'm not really interested in it personally, looks like a really solid entry level mirrorless camera on the RF platform that, yeah, it's got some drawbacks. It's not state of the art. It's not the best thing in the world. It's 3 years old now at this point, using a sensor that's basically 3 or 4 years old as well. I mean, it's 2 years old. I don't even remember. It's, came out in 2018, 2019. It's using the sensor from the 6D Mark II, which came out in 2017, 2018, something like that. So, it's a bit long in the tooth. It could warrant being updated. And I think, I almost feel like that's the thing that Canon needs to sort of update now. That as much as everybody wants to bag or look at the high end, oh well, how's the R5 compete against the Z7 II or the A67R R350 whatever, blah blah blah. Like, Canon's got the high end pretty good, working reasonably well now. I feel like it's time to digital rebel it. Like, I would love to see. There was a rumor on Canon Rumors a lot recently that Canon has an EOS R coming and it's going to make all the fanboys cry or something like that. And Of course, I can't figure out what that means because, like, as a Canon user, and I won't say a fanboy, but as a Canon user, what I want to see is a strong platform. Because the stronger Canon's platform is, well, the better it is for me, because it means they are selling cameras, which in a world where money is required for things to function properly, and I won't even say in a capitalist society, but just straight up, you have to pay people money. This is not Star Trek. We do not have this utopian, money-free world. Selling cameras means that Canon has the money to put into R&D for better cameras. So, two, it means that because they're selling cameras, they have money going into R&D to make better cameras and lenses. Three, it means that they have a broader, stronger platform for the products as a whole. So more lens options, more camera options. That's only a good thing. Regardless of whether your sole thing is the EOS R3 or the EOS R1, and it's going to be that is your world. A strong performing R platform as a whole makes that better for you. The where was I going with this? So stronger platform. Yeah, okay. So the rumor that there's going to be a camera coming and it's going to make people cry. So I don't I guess, I mean, super misguided something, I don't know, could be bad, but like if Canon were to announce that they're going to make let's just say 20 to 30 megapixel, it's going to be the Digital Rebel R or something like that, and it's going to literally take the entry level Digital Rebel line and make it a mirrorless EOS R. Judging by the 5D or the RP, they could do it as full frame. I would not be adverse to seeing Canon leave APS-C to the EOS Ms and full frame be the R platform, period. If it's not full frame, it's not an R. I know there's people who would be like, well, but mirrorless or APS-C and da 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 da, but I'm not convinced. I've thought a lot about this. I'm not convinced that the R platform gets stronger because it has APS-C in it. First of all, the camera can't be made much smaller. The diameter, the outside diameter of the lens mount dictates just how short the camera can be. And you really can't make, just because you put a smaller sensor in an EOS R size camera doesn't mean that you can make that camera appreciably smaller. Likewise, the lens situation goes the same way. The outside diameter of the lens mount dictates the largest diameter, or the minimum largest diameter. So you could have a lens that started at the lens mount and then necked down and got smaller, but then that lens mount is still the largest diameter of the lens. You can of course go the other way. You can have a lens mount that's larger than the mount diameter, but that mount diameter sets the minimum that lens can be. So going APS-C, the lenses still have to be about the same diameter. They could be shorter focal lengths and stuff like that, but then you just start sowing confusion into the product line. How do you designate DX or crop from full frame lenses? Because you have to. You cannot have a crop platform without having at least certain crop lenses. Like there's a reason that there's 18 to 55s or 17 to 55s on every crop platform, because that is the focal length you need for a 1.5 or 1.6x crop factors to have a walk around general purpose wide to short telephoto focal length lens. If you don't have that, your crop cameras on your full frame platform are just inherently not as useful. Like you're inherently a 16 to 35 or a 15 to 35 inherently just doesn't get you that short telephoto end of what you would normally have in a general purpose zoom. So think 24 to 70 or 24 to 105 on a full frame camera. Well, 16 to 35 doesn't cover that. 15 to 35 doesn't cover that. And 16 to 55 does. Likewise, you need wider wides. Like a 14 to, like the 14 to 35 is a stupid wide lens on a full frame camera. Like nobody is going to dispute that. Or a 12 to 24 or something like that. On a APS-C camera, it's not really that wide anymore. And you're not getting, you're hamstringing that part of the thing. Plus you run into the whole, how do you brand it? How do you market it? How do you tie it together? And you're also losing, in my opinion, some of the biggest selling point of the whole APS-C platform, you know, as it is, which is you can make the camera smaller. You can have smaller lenses. The reality is you cannot make an EOS R5, period, that's as small as an EOS M. The M62, for example, or the M200. You can't make an R series camera that small, especially height-wise. Like width-wise, yeah, that's doable, but height-wise, because of the lens mount. The RF lens mount is taller outside, outside diameter. The RF lens mount is larger than the height of a camera like the EOS M62. So I like the idea of keeping them separate. I like the idea of an entry-level full frame Rebel EOS R. And then with the rest of the product lineup, with the rest of the lens lineup, like it feels like it's got that, it could be really, like, you don't have to have a lot of glass. Like you have really good coverage as a photographer, 24 to 105, 100 to 400. You got coverage from 24 to 400 and two lenses. That's all you need. I mean, for most people, all you really need is a 24 to 240. But, I won't say gripe there, but my thing there is if I'm buying an interchangeable lens camera, I'm probably going to interchange lenses. So, I'm not going to say, well, just that's all you need, but you could start with a 24 to 240 and you could start adding on things like the 16-8 or a macro or whatever, and have something. But like for way less than, again, it's not going to be cheap, but for way less than it would cost to do it as a professional, like using L glass, you can have coverage from 16 to 800 with entry-level RF glass. And I think that's pretty impressive. So a 16 to 2, a 16-2A, a 24 105, a 100 to 400, and a 611 or an 811, and you've got pretty ridiculous setup in terms of focal lengths and coverage that you actually can go out and shoot with. And at 600 800, that 800, you're out in bird photography world where the guy who's standing next to you with the white 800 f5.6, yeah, okay, it's 2 stops faster, it's 3-4 pounds heavier, and his wallet is $10,000 lighter, and that's a lot of money to start talking about for not having had spent. Now, I will say the one thing I know people don't particularly care about with Canon and their new kind of lenses is that there's more 6.3s and 7.1s and f8s and f11s. And, I've got 2 thoughts on this. First of all is if you were, first of all is one of the problems here is if you have a full frame sensor, you need full frame focal lengths to have full frame angles of view. Sorry, that's just the way it works. So a 400 is a 400. You can't get away with a 200, which could be a physically smaller lens, but because it's a micro four thirds and a 2x crop factor, that 200 has the same angle of view as a 400 and fills that same role, but can do it in a smaller package because it doesn't need to be a 400 millimeter, have a 400 millimeter focal length. You need to have full frame focal lengths. So the only way to make a full frame lens smaller is reduce the range and reduce the aperture. So Sony did this on the little compact lens that they released with the that compact alpha. I don't even remember what it's called now, but it only goes out to like 60. It's like a 24 to 60. It's not 24 to 70. And it's slow. It's not an f2.8. It's not an f4. It's, you know, a 5.6 to 6.3 or something like that. Same thing goes with stuff like the 100 to 400. If you want a more compact lens, and it seems like at least some people want smaller cameras. In some cases, it really seems like people want physics defying smaller cameras, like vastly smaller cameras. In other places, I find that photographers are like, I'll be honest, I like my R5 because it's a little bit smaller than my 5D Mark IV, but not tremendously smaller than the 5D Mark IV. And there's a point where just having small for the sake of small really compromises the usability, the ergonomics, the balance with a lens. Like if you've got a little tiny camera, I mean, we've all probably seen the pictures of like a 600 f4 or a 400 2.8 with an EOS M or a Nikon 1 on the back of it on a mount adapter, and the lens is like bigger than the camera by a long shot. That's horribly unbalanced. Part of the reason that I put battery grips on my cameras is to add some mass, because when I have a heavy telephoto lens on it, like a 100 to 400 even, the added mass balances the camera better. It's more back heavy and less front heavy, where it tends to just want to tip forward. So I don't necessarily have a problem with more lenses being 7.1 or f8 or f11, especially in the like the 611 and 811. It's a different market, and I think, you know, and it's a different set of trade-offs. So these most of these lower end, more entry level lenses are about trying to make something that's lighter and more compact, that's at least perceived to be more attractive to more users or more potential users. That, you know, a lot of people, like for example, my mom has an EOS M. She loves her M. It's small, it's light. She would never carry around an EOS R and a 24 to 105. Like it's too big. It's too much bulk. It's too heavy. It's not enjoyable. It makes it not enjoyable for her to be carrying the camera and taking pictures. And that's a big part of why, I won't say why she takes pictures, but that's a big part of her taking pictures is she enjoys doing it. And and this is where I run into problems too with people who are like, well, she use your cell phone if she does. Well, no, she uses the tools that she uses because she gets the pictures she wants, and she uses something that she enjoys using. She doesn't enjoy using a cell phone. She hates taking pictures with her cell phone. She does it largely because it's the only thing she has at hand when she does it. But that's a completely different use case from, say, me, who has no problem lugging around a 5-pound mirrorless setup with a big telephoto lens to get a picture that I'm trying to get. So I think that these more entry level lenses are really being aimed at trying to walk that balance between smaller and lighter, and therefore more approachable or more comfortable or better potentially even for more users, versus just being something that's big and heavy. And like I said, so that's the compromise. The compromise I don't particularly care, at least in the like 24-105 and 24-250 or 240, is requiring massive amounts of distortion correction to get a non-mechanically vignetted image at 24 millimeters. I understand why they're doing it, but it makes it really, in my opinion, less than ideal. I certainly wouldn't want to shoot with those. I vastly prefer to have a lens that doesn't mechanically distort like or vignette like that. So, again, not my wheelhouse. But if you're shooting JPEG on an EOS RP with a 24-105, what is it, f4 to 7.1, and you have the distortion correction turned on, which is turned on by default in the camera, you'd never even know it was doing it. You just get a picture. And at some point, that's all that really matters, is that you got a picture. So I'm not going to talk about lenses today. I'm going to wrap this up here. If you have some thoughts on any of the stuff I talked about, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of the development of the EOS R system, where you'd maybe like to see it go, where you're looking for it to go, etc. I'm certainly interested to see what Canon announces, what these lenses actually have capability-wise, etc., and price point-wise is going to be a big one when Canon announces these next week. And yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not going to go into talking about gear envy and whatever today. I've ran longer than I intended to, actually. So I'm going to wrap this up here. If you thought this was interesting, informative, it sparked some thoughts in your mind or something, please smash that like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Mondays and Wednesdays, currently, I have videos going up talking about the EOS R5 tips and tricks. That's happening on Mondays. On Wednesdays, I'm talking about lights and lighting. So those are the two sort of series that I'm running in concurrently right now. So subscribe to find the stuff, get notified, whatever, when those videos get put up. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.